The ocean is supposed to be the darkest place on Earth, a world where light dies before it can breathe. Yet, on a quiet night in the Pacific, something impossible happened as the seafloor erupted into a soft blue glow that pulsed like a heartbeat, leaving the science team frozen in shock as they watched their instruments struggle to keep up. What if the ocean is hiding a kind of light we were never meant to see? What if something alive down there can switch it on at will? And what if those 12 minutes were not an accident, but a message meant for anyone brave enough to look back? The glow faded as quickly as it came, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy and electric. And in that silence, the team realized the world they thought they understood had just cracked open in front of them. The glow was gone, but its afterimage clung to the crew like a silent echo, each of them trying to steady their thoughts while the submersible drifted above a seafloor that now looked perfectly ordinary. Lena steadied her breathing, replaying every flicker in her mind, trying to convince herself it wasn't a trick of their instruments or a shared hallucination. Kai kept scanning the monitors as if the ocean might suddenly confess what it was hiding, while Mira tapped through sensor logs with trembling fingers. Nothing made sense. No known organism could light up that wide or that bright, and no geological process behaved with such precision. The darkness pressing against the glass felt thicker than before, as if something down there had simply switched itself off and was waiting, watching them in return. A soft rumble trembled through the sub, so faint that only the most focused ear could catch it. Yet all three froze at the same moment, as if pulled by an instinct older than thought. The ocean floor below remained dark, but something had shifted in the pressure around them, like a current that wasn't a current at all. Lena whispered a quick command and Kai sent the sub lower, careful, cautious, letting it sink through the stillness. Mira watched a small waveform spike on her tablet before flattening again, as though something immense had stirred beneath the sediment. Oh, the silence grew heavier, the kind that settles right before a truth reveals itself, and each of them felt the subtle dread that whatever caused that glow might not be finished with them yet. They settled a few meters above the seafloor, the sub humming quietly as sensors clicked into a fresh scan. Lena's thoughts raced, trying to piece together any known phenomenon that could produce such light, but each idea collapsed under the weight of what they had seen. Kai muttered readings under his breath, more confused with each passing second, while Mira traced faint thermal disturbances that seemed to drift across the sediment like ghost trails. The ocean felt alive in a way that made their skin prickle, a place aware of their presence. They had come seeking data, routine, mapping, standard observations, yet it already felt as though they had crossed into something they were never meant to witness, and the silence outside pressed against them like a warning. The soft vibration returned, stronger this time, humming through the metal frame like a distant signal. Lena's heart kicked as she recognized the rhythm. Not random, not seismic, but patterned, almost deliberate. Mira inhaled sharply while Kai adjusted the sensors, his voice tightening as the waveform rose again, forming a repeating shape that none of them could identify. The glow had been visible, breathtaking, impossible. But this was different. This was communication or imitation or something that wanted to be noticed. The hum faded just as fast as it came, leaving behind a ringing silence that sank deep into their chests. And in that moment, all three understood that whatever lived in the darkness below had just reached out to them, and was waiting for their next move. The quiet around the sub felt heavier than the water itself as Lena instructed Kai to run a full spectral sweep, hoping for even the faintest clue that the glow had left behind. The screens flickered in response, struggling to interpret something outside their usual range, something the equipment clearly wasn't designed to detect. Mira whispered that they were still picking up a low-level resonance, almost like an echo of the earlier pulse, drifting through the water in slow waves. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried a presence, as if the deep was speaking in a language too old for anyone to remember. The pressure outside creaked along the hull, steady but tense, and the three of them felt the strange awareness again, the sense that the ocean wasn't done with them, but was slowly drawing them closer. Lena steadied the sub as they crept along the seabed, the floodlights slicing through blackness that seemed thicker than before. The hum they sensed earlier felt like it had settled into the water around them, an invisible thread pulling them towards something unseen. Kai muttered that the temperature was dropping in strange pockets, shifting in sharp dips that didn't match any known pattern. Mira pressed her forehead against the glass for a moment, saying she felt like something moved beneath the sediment, even though nothing appeared on sonar. The crew exchanged glances, each feeling the same quiet fear that maybe the glow wasn't the phenomenon itself, but a warning of something else waiting just ahead. Then, without warning, the resonance spike hit. Just a single jolt, sharp enough to shake loose a few tools from the wall and send Mira stumbling back into her seat. Kai cursed under his breath as he tried to stabilize the readings, but the sensors flooded with static, as if they were being drowned in noise from an unknown source. The pulse had direction, Lena realized, pointing not outward but downward, deep into a narrow fissure between two towering ridges of volcanic rock. The feeling inside the sub shifted again, an instinctive tension threading through the air, and all three knew they were moments away from deciding whether to follow that signal or turn back before it was too late. Lena guided the sub toward the fissure, her breath steady, even though her heartbeat felt loud in her chest. The crack in the seafloor was wider than it had first appeared, stretching into a long, shadowed passage where the light vanished almost instantly. Kai whispered that the resonance was growing stronger, rising in soft oscillations that felt more like a heartbeat than a signal. Mira's tablet flickered with faint geometric shapes, patterns forming and dissolving so fast she couldn't track them. The closer they drifted, the colder the water became, and the silence wrapped around them with a weight that made their skin tighten. Something was awake down there. The moment they entered the fissure, everything changed. The walls around them glowed with a faint blue shimmer, threads of light stretching through cracks like veins, carrying some kind of living energy. Kai stared in stunned silence, unable to voice what his instruments were failing to capture. Mira leaned closer to the window, whispering that the glow looked almost familiar, like the pulse they saw earlier but trapped inside stone. Lena felt a chill run across her arms as she realized they were no longer chasing the phenomenon. They were inside it. The passage tightened, the shimmer brightened, and a low, distant rumble vibrated through the hull. Something deeper was waiting for them. The deeper they pushed into the fissure, the more the world outside the sub seemed to shift into something unfamiliar, almost unreal. The soft blue veins running through the stone pulsed in slow, deliberate rhythms, as though following the crew's movements. Kai whispered that the resonance was stabilizing into a repeating pattern, something structured and impossibly clean. Mira said it felt like the glow was responding to them, adjusting when they changed speed or direction, almost like a living guide. Lena kept her eyes forward, steady and focused, yet a quiet fear settled in her chest as she realized the fissure was narrowing, pulling them toward a destination none of them could see. The silence inside the sub felt tight and breathless, as if the deep itself was holding them in its grasp. The passage suddenly widened into a cavern so large their floodlights barely reached the far end. The blue glow here was softer, more diffused, drifting like faint clouds suspended in thick water. Kai muttered that the pressure readings were strange, fluctuating in gentle waves instead of sudden spikes. Mira noticed that the sediment on the cavern floor seemed to be arranged in circular patterns, almost like rings radiating outward from a central point. Lena slowed the sub, unsure whether they had discovered a natural formation or stumbled into something crafted by forces beyond their understanding. The cavern's silence felt older than anything they had encountered, the kind that made every breath feel borrowed. A faint movement caught Mira's eye, something shifting just beyond the floodlights, subtle enough to question whether it had truly happened. Lena slowed the sub to a near stop, as Kai confirmed a soft thermal disturbance drifting across their path. The water ahead shimmered in a way that didn't match any current or known marine life, as though something invisible was taking shape. The crew held their breath as the disturbance grew clearer, forming a slow ripple that bent the blue haze around it. The unknown presence didn't advance or retreat. It simply hovered there, waiting. The feeling inside the sub thickened into a kind of awe-stricken fear, the unnerving sense that they were not alone in this cavern. The ripple shifted again, this time forming a spiraling motion that pulled glowing sediment into a slow rotation. Mira gasped softly as the particles arranged themselves into a loose circle, spreading outward like a doorway forming from light. Kai watched the resonance waves spike into a new pattern, smoother and more controlled than any signal they had recorded before. Lena felt a chill crawl up her spine as the spiral brightened, reflecting across every surface of the sub. The shape did not move toward them or drift away. It simply existed, deliberate and patient, as though waiting for the crew to acknowledge it. The cavern seemed to breathe around them, the water pulsing with a rhythm too precise to be accidental. The spiral collapsed without warning, folding inward like a closing flower, leaving behind a sudden burst of blue light that washed across the cavern and over the sub. The crew shielded their eyes as the brightness flooded every corner of the cabin. When the light thinned, the cavern looked unchanged, but something had shifted in the readings. Something subtle, yet impossible to ignore. Kai, said the resonance pattern, now mirrored the exact sequence they had recorded during the 12-minute glow on the ocean floor. Mira whispered that it almost felt like the cavern had recognized them. Lena stared into the haze ahead, feeling the deep pull of curiosity and fear mixed together, and she knew this was only the beginning of what the ocean was trying to reveal. The cavern felt different now, as if the burst of blue light had woken something deep within the stone. Lena steadied the sub, listening to the low hum that drifted through the water like an echo of the earlier pulse. Kai leaned closer to his monitor, whispering that the resonance pattern was no longer random, but reacting to their movements, shifting gently whenever the sub changed direction. Mira stared at the swirling haze ahead, saying it felt like the cavern was guiding them, not pushing or warning, but inviting. The silence outside thickened once more, not threatening but undeniably aware, and for the first time, Lena sensed they had crossed an invisible threshold into a place the ocean had kept hidden for reasons no one could understand. A narrow tunnel opened at the far end of the cavern, almost invisible, until the sub drifted closer and the blue haze thinned enough to reveal it. Lena hesitated before guiding the sub forward, sensing that whatever waited beyond this passage would change everything they thought they knew about the phenomenon. Kai reported a drop in temperature, but not the sharp kind I'd felt before. This was even controlled, almost intentional. Mira pointed out symbols on her tablet screen, shapes forming from resonance data that resembled repeating loops. None of them recognized the meaning, but all three felt the same pull, the unspoken urge to follow the tunnel and see where it led. The tunnel tightened around them, its walls lined with shimmering strands that pulsed in the same rhythm as the earlier glow. The pressure felt different here, thicker in a way none of the instruments could explain, as if the water itself carried a memory of whatever created this place. Kai said the resonance was no longer environmental. It was focused, directed, almost like a beam pointing deeper into the passage. Mira sat completely still, her eyes following the pulsing patterns on the walls as though they formed a silent language. Lena kept moving forward slowly, trusting her instincts even though every second felt like stepping deeper into something ancient and unknown. The tunnel suddenly dropped into a vertical chamber, a vast cylinder descending farther than the floodlights could reach. The walls were smoother here, almost polished, reflecting soft blue light that rippled like waves frozen in stone. Kai whispered that they were detecting energy pockets arranged in a perfect spiral pattern, something far too structured to be natural. Mira felt a soft vibration in the water, subtle but rhythmic, as though the chamber itself was breathing. Lena hovered the sub near the chamber's edge, stunned by the impossible symmetry stretching below them. The deep no longer felt empty or wild. It felt engineered, shaped by something with intent. A soft, low pulse rose from the bottom of the chamber, calm, steady, unmistakably deliberate. The light along the walls brightened at the same time, washing the chamber in waves of blue that shimmered like distant lightning. Mira whispered that the pulse matched the exact energy signature of the 12-minute glow on the ocean floor. Kai confirmed it with a trembling voice, saying the pattern was identical down to the smallest spike. Lena felt the truth settle over her like cold water. They hadn't stumbled on a random event. They had found the source, and whatever lived or operated here had chosen this moment to reveal itself, calling to them from the darkness below. The pulse grew steadier as the sub descended along the chamber's spiral, each vibration moving through the hull like a slow heartbeat, guiding them downward. Lena kept her hands firm on the controls, fighting the instinct to pull back even as the mystery pulled them in deeper. Kai whispered that the resonance was no longer just matching the earlier glow. It was syncing with the sub itself, adjusting in real time as though tracking their presence. Mira stared into the deep shadows below, saying she felt like they were being welcomed instead of warned, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. The deeper they sank, the more the chamber felt alive, humming with a presence that seemed impossibly aware of their every move. Halfway down the chamber, the pulse shifted again, softening into a rhythm so delicate it barely brushed their senses. But the change was unmistakable, as though something below had sensed their approach and adjusted its signal to match their caution. Kai noted that the energy pockets lining the walls were changing shape, forming long, fluid patterns that reminded him of waveforms adapting mid-flow. Mira whispered that the patterns almost looked like instructions, though she couldn't explain why. Lena slowed the descent, listening to the subtle hum beneath the silence, feeling that whatever they were approaching was far older than the chamber itself, and perhaps far more intelligent. As they moved deeper, the chamber walls began to narrow again, forming a funnel that led into a dimly lit opening. A faint glow spilled from the passage below, gentle but steady, like a source of light hidden just out of view. Kai's sensors detected a stable pattern unlike anything they had recorded so far, calm, consistent, and deliberate, almost like a beacon waiting in the dark. Mira leaned toward the lower viewport, whispering that the light didn't look reflected or scattered. It looked produced. Lena felt her pulse quicken as she realized they were drawing closer to the heart of the phenomenon, the place where the impossible blue glow had been born. They passed through the opening and entered a smaller chamber, where the source of the glow finally revealed itself, not as a creature or machine, but as a formation unlike anything in recorded geology. It rose from the seafloor like a cluster of smooth pillars, woven together by glowing strands that pulsed in perfect unison. The light was soft, yet powerful, rising through the water in gentle waves that felt almost warm. Kai whispered that the energy signature coming from it was impossibly clean, more stable than anything natural, more elegant than anything engineered. Mira clutched her tablet, speechless. Lena stared at the formation with wide, steady eyes, knowing they had just found the reason the ocean floor had lit up for 12 minutes. The formation pulsed again, brighter this time, sending a soft wave of blue light through the chamber that washed gently over the sub. The pulse felt different. Not a warning, not a lure, but a response. Kai whispered that the energy output rose exactly when they entered, as though the structure had sensed them. Mira said the glow was beginning to sync with the rhythm of the earlier pulses, repeating the same pattern that had illuminated the ocean floor. Lena felt a chill even as the light warmed the water around them. Whatever this formation was, it wasn't silent. It was communicating, answering, acknowledging their arrival. And suddenly, Lena understood. They weren't observing the phenomenon. They were part of it now. The chamber's glow softened again, settling into a gentle rhythm that felt almost reassuring, yet none of them could shake the sense that they had crossed a point of no return. Lena kept the sub perfectly still, letting the formation pulse freely, as if waiting for the next move. Kai whispered that the resonance pattern was shifting in a way he had never seen before, forming loops that rose and fell like spoken phrases. Mira leaned closer to the glass, her voice barely audible as she said it. Felt like the formation was trying to communicate, not with words, but with patterns, pulses, and light. The silence wrapped around them again, heavy and deliberate, and Lena realized they weren't just witnessing a phenomenon. They were in the middle of a conversation with something ancient, intelligent, and impossibly deep. Then the pulses shifted again, this time focusing into a narrow beam of blue light that stretched upward like a signal. Kai's monitor reacted instantly, filling with lines that trembled in perfect synchronization with the beam. Mira gasped, noticing that the beam did not scatter through the water like ordinary light. It held its shape, thin and solid, as if it carried information. Lena moved the sub slightly to one side, and the beam shifted with them, adjusting its angle to remain pointed directly at the viewport. The message was undeniable. Whatever this formation was, it had noticed them completely, and now it was responding with precision that left all three in stunned silence. The beam then fractured into dozens of smaller strands that wrapped themselves through the water in spirals, each pulse timed with impossible accuracy. Kai whispered that the formation had begun transmitting a pattern too complex for their instruments to decode in real time. Mira stared at the spiraling threads, her voice trembling as she wondered aloud if the formation was attempting to show them something. Lena steadied the sub again, forcing herself to breathe slowly as she watched the spirals rotate, each one carrying a faint shimmer like symbols floating just beyond understanding. The air in the cabin grew heavier with realization. This was not random, not geological, and not biological. It was intentional. The spirals collapsed at once, folding inward like a breath being drawn back into the formation. Then the ground beneath the structure vibrated, low and steady, sending ripples through the water and across the chamber walls. Kai's sensors erupted with readings that made no sense, energy spikes rising beyond measurable limits, forming shapes that repeated the same looping signature they had followed since the beginning. Mira whispered that the formation was preparing something, but her voice trailed off as the glow intensified. Lena felt the weight of the moment press against her chest. They were no longer observers of the glow. They were standing on the threshold of whatever it truly was. The formation released a final pulse, stronger, clearer, and impossibly precise, filling the chamber with a blue flash that felt alive. The sub jolted as the water around them vibrated like a struck bell, yet the pulse didn't fade. Instead, it hovered in the air between them and the formation, suspended in the water like a living sphere of light. Kai whispered that the energy signature inside the sphere matched the exact 12-minute glow recorded on the ocean floor, down to the smallest fluctuation. Mira's voice shook as she suggested it might be an echo, a stored memory, something the formation wanted them to see. Lena felt her breath catch. They weren't just witnessing the past. They were being shown it. The sphere of light hovered silently, its surface shifting in soft waves like a memory trying to take form. Lena felt the weight of the moment settle into her chest as the pulse inside the glowing sphere deepened, steady and deliberate, almost like a slow inhale. Kai whispered that something inside the sphere was changing, reorganizing, aligning itself with their presence. Mira leaned closer to the glass, her breath thin as she said, it felt like the sphere wanted them to see something, not from their world, but from the deep's own history. The chamber around them grew unnervingly still, every drifting particle frozen as though time itself was waiting. And then the sphere pulsed again, brighter than before, as if inviting them to cross a line they could never return from. The sphere expanded slowly, its surface stretching outward until the glow filled the viewport. Lena tightened her grip on the controls, unsure if the sub would be pulled forward or swallowed whole. But the sphere stayed perfectly still. Kai whispered that the resonance pattern was shifting again, stabilizing into something unmistakably deliberate, almost like a message repeating itself. Mira's voice trembled as she suggested the sphere was showing them the moment the ocean floor had glowed, replaying the impossible event from its own perspective. The light brightened again, soft and blinding, and all three felt their breath catch as the chamber around them dissolved into the pure, steady glow. As the light consumed their view, new shapes began to form, soft outlines at first, then clearer patterns that rippled across the sphere like images cast through water. Mira gasped, recognizing the terrain of the ocean floor, not as it looked now, but as it had looked during the 12 minutes of impossible glow. Kai confirmed it with a shaking voice, saying the resonance matched perfectly. Lena stared, speechless, as the seabed in the sphere pulsed with the same gentle rhythm she had witnessed from the sub hours earlier. The realization struck them all at once. The formation wasn't just showing them what happened, it was showing them why it happened. Showing them why it happened. The vision within the sphere deepened, revealing something none of them expected. Beneath the glowing seabed, lines of light spread through the sediment like roots carrying hidden energy. The glow wasn't random. It was released intentionally, rising from channels buried deep in the earth, connected in ways no natural process could imitate. Kai whispered that the formation they found was only one node in a larger network buried across the ocean floor. Mira's voice shook as she realized the glow had been triggered, perhaps by pressure, movement, or even their presence on the surface that night. Lena's breath caught as she understood the true scale of what they had found. The deep wasn't reacting to them. It had been watching. The sphere flickered once, then pulled inward rapidly, shrinking until it was no larger than a fist. Its light dimmed to a soft glow before drifting slowly back toward the formation. Settling between the pillars like a returning ember, the chamber faded back to its original stillness, the pulses quieting into a gentle rhythm that felt almost like a farewell. Kai whispered that the resonance pattern had stabilized into silence, as if the formation had finished speaking. Mira wiped a tear from her cheek, unable to explain the strange mix of awe and sadness settling over her. Lena guided the sub backward, her hands steady but her heart heavier than before. The deep had shown them its secret, not by accident, but by choice. And as the chamber receded into darkness, Lena felt the weight of a truth she knew they could never fully share with the world.